15 Most Bizarre Real Cases of Temporary Amnesia, Part 1.
If you are brand new to our channel, we invite you to take a moment to subscribe. Just click on the lit red button as well as the gray bell. Why the bell? Well, it will let you know every time we post a new video.
1. Anonymous medical student. A 2013 research study detailed the experience of a 28-year-old Nigerian medical student. The student was in his final year of medical school when he disappeared. He was found 2 days later almost 400 miles away from where he lived. Doctors were able to determine that he suffered hallucinations prior to his disappearance. Shortly after the hallucinations started and he wandered off, he found himself at his brother's home. He had no recollection of the 8-hour trip there. It's thought that his fugue state was due to academic stress. He was under pressure to pass exams, and he was at risk of losing funding, and therefore unable to finish paying for school. Physically, he hadn't been sleeping or eating regularly leading up to his disappearance. He'd also lost the desire to take part in activities that he once enjoyed. Unlike some of the other examples on this list, his memory was intact. Months after the ordeal, he was still unable to determine what happened to him during the 2 days he can't account for before arriving at his brother's house. 2. Doug Bruce. In 2005, Bruce was the subject of a documentary that detailed his fugue experience. One day in 2003 he found himself on Coney Island and made his way towards a police station. While there he explained that he didn't know who he was or how he came to find himself there. A friend was able to confirm his identity. Although faced with this information, Bruce didn't recognize details he was given and was unable to recall any part of his personal life. He found out he lived in Paris and was a successful banker there. He also discovered that he was currently studying in New York. Many who have seen the documentary have claimed it's likely fake, but people who know Bruce attest to the fact that there's no doubt that he's lost his memory. When approached by people he knew from his past, he showed no signs of recognition of them. 3. David Fitzpatrick. In December of 2005, David Fitzpatrick disappeared from his life in London, England. Admittedly, he had been having a hard time before his disappearance. He'd had a bad breakup with a longtime girlfriend, and he lost custody of his daughter. He was unable to hold on to a job for a long time. He was eventually kicked out of his parents' house. It's thought this combination of events triggered his fugue state. Fitzpatrick supposedly left his personal belongings, including his wallet, cell phone and keys behind, wandered off and eventually boarded a train. He rode it around while in a fugue state before arriving at a local hospital. When he arrived, 4 hours after he initially disappeared, he had no memory of anything before that time. All of his memories were gone. He's been unable to determine what he did during the 4 hours he was wandering. His story was profiled on a local TV documentary in England. 4. Jody Roberts. In 1985, Jody Roberts was a reporter at the Tacoma News-Tribune in Washington. After weeks of uncharacteristic behavior, for example, she began drinking heavily, she disappeared. Fortunately, she was found a few days later in Colorado, but it was unclear how she got there. She was taken to a hospital, but since she didn't have any ID, no one was able to identify her. Doctors determined she was suffering from dissociative fugue, since she was unable to remember anything about herself. Roberts settled down in Sitka, Alaska, and started a new life there. She called herself Jane D. Williams, and even got married, and had 4 children, 2 sets of twin girls. 12 years later, in 1997, her true identity was discovered when friends saw old news coverage of her story. She was eventually reunited with her family in Washington. She was unable to recognize any of them, but was happy to be reunited with them. They had been trying to help her regain her memory and reconnect with her siblings. 5. Renee LaManna. Renee LaManna's family reported her missing on January 8, 1994. They explained that she suffered from occasional states of dissociative fugue. Originally from New Jersey, she was spotted there in 1995, and again in New York that same year. She wasn't spotted again until 2014, in Virginia. 20 years after she first disappeared. There have been a handful of sightings of her since then. People who supposedly interact with her say that she said she was from Florida and was in search of her family on the East Coast. Perhaps this is evidence of her search for her home and family. She supposedly pulls around a small suitcase which contains maps of the East Coast. She's believed to have adopted different names over the years, such as Renee Lehman, Jean Smith and Darlene Hansen. Her older sister, Margaret LaManna, is hopeful she'll be reunited with her sister one day. 6. Amber Geweck. In 2011, Amber Geweck, a mother of 4, disappeared from her apartment in Tunnel Hill, Georgia. At the time, a police search located her abandoned car near her parents' house, but her whereabouts were unknown for 3 weeks. She flagged down police officers explaining that she didn't know who or where she was. She was in fact in Illinois, which is 650 miles away from her home. A police investigation was able to uncover surveillance footage of her at an ATM and dollar store after she disappeared. After that, there's no evidence of where she was. She was eventually reunited with her family, who tried to help her regain her memory. Like Michael Boatwright, she was diagnosed with 2 forms of amnesia. Her memory slowly began to return, but some of the public have questioned the authenticity of her story. Her oldest child and ex-husband question whether she's telling the truth. Her story spread across social media, where users posted questions pointing out what they consider to be inconsistencies in her story. Whatever the case may be, she's rebuilding her life and reconnecting with her children. 7. David Thorpe. In 2014, a homeless British man was found sleeping in the street. When asked by police, he said his name was either David or Tony Thorpe and believed that he was in his 50s. He was aware of the fact that he generally suffered from dissociative fugue. He likely experienced similar episodes to this one in the past. The police appealed to the public for leads that would link him to his family members and confirm where he was from. Until his family was located, he was supported by various charities. Fortunately for him, within days of news outlets circulating his picture and details of his story, family members came forward and were able to confirm his identity and where he was from. Much like Benjamin Kyle, he chose to keep this information private and didn't reveal details to the public. 8. Anonymous American woman. In 2009, a 33-year-old Texas woman told her story to 48 Hours. However, she chose to remain anonymous due to the circumstances. Her story starts in 2001, when she was driving on a local highway. The next thing she knew, it was 3:30 in the morning and she'd driven 10 hours from Texas to Santa Fe, New Mexico. She had no recollection of making the journey. Rather than panic, she checked into a hotel for the night. Her story took a bizarre turn when she awoke the next morning not knowing where she was and, worse yet, who she was. When the woman was eventually reunited with her family, she was unable to recognize them, including her 3 young children. Her fugue state was likely brought on by highly stressful life situations. She had a newborn baby which was the result of an unplanned pregnancy. Her husband was addicted to drugs and suicidal, and to add to that, she had a stressful job. With help, she regained her memory a year later.